Cinemassacre's Monster Madness. Happy Halloween, and this is Night of the Living Dead. That's right, we're gonna watch the whole movie, because that's what I always say, you know, when you're reviewing a movie, a lot of times I feel like I can't do justice to it, so just see the movie, and that's what we're doing. This is a very creepy opening scene, and I don't know why, because it's just a car driving down a road, but there's something about the music and just the images, that cross sort of section on the right with the fence. Something about the landscape with the dead trees. It's just the perfect beginning to a horror movie. It's a prelude to something bad. Something bad is going to happen. The cracks on the roads right there. It's not something you can plan. It's just the way it looked. They put down a camera, they filmed it. This was filmed over the year of 1967 and released in October of 1968. And that would make this roughly the 45-year anniversary. And here they are going up the hill, very ominous, with the sign with the bullet holes in it. I equate this to going up on a roller coaster. You know what's coming up, you're about to go down, and the thrills are going to start from here. Now, of course, this is one of the most important public domain films of all time. I'm going to talk a little more about that later, about why it's public domain and what it means for the film. But right now I want to talk about the cemetery. This is Evans City Cemetery in Pennsylvania. I've been there before. It looks a lot different now. A lot of the trees are gone, and one of the reasons, I think I'm going to get off track again. I should be talking about these people. This is Judith O'Day and Russ Reiner.
A lot of good the extra daylight does us.
Russ Reiner actually happened to be one of the producers on the film, along with Carl Hardman.
If it really bugged you, Johnny, you wouldn't do it.
You think I want to blow Sunday on a scene like this? You know, I figure we're either going to have to move Mother out here or move the grave into Pittsburgh.
So the dead is already an inconvenience. And that's what I think is so great about how the scene begins. It's just a brother and sister bickering. They're at a graveyard to just visit a grave. It's a perfectly ordinary reason to be there. And you think all the horror movies that take place at graveyards, you know, it would be some kind of supernatural reason. The police would be there investigating some person who had their throat torn out by some animal that nobody knows. Oh, listen to the voice on the radio.
Coming back on the air after an interruption due to technical problems.
That was the voice of Carl Hardman, and he was the other producer on the film. And that's one thing you'll notice a lot on here, is that all these people got together to make the movie. They would all just do whatever they could. So a lot of the people who were behind the camera were in front of the camera as well.
Which row is it in?
One thing I really love about independent films is look how the camera moves. Somebody's always holding the camera. They're these very, neat little moves. They're very simple, and I don't know why. I guess because I grew up making home movies, I'm so used to that kind of camera movement. The thing is, with bigger budget movies, it's always got to be a dolly. It's always got to be a crane. You always get these perfect, smooth camera movements, or they go for a deliberate handheld shakiness that they do all the time. But what strikes me about this movie is that it's very real, very realistic. And by the way, they're visiting a grave here. It is a real grave. So whoever's grave it is, actually, I looked it up. It's a guy named Nicholas Kramer. In fact, I visited the grave myself, so I've seen it. And it's kind of funny if you think about it, that this person is in some way immortalized in a classic horror film. There is a story about how there was a storm that went through the cemetery, and it actually uprooted a lot of the corpses, about 200 bodies according to John Russo. who was one of the writers on the film, along with George Romero. I never noticed how nerdy he looks. Look at the pens in the pocket and the tie, glasses.
Hey, come on, Barb. Church was this morning, huh?
Sorry, God. That's one of the riff tracks jokes in the movie. So this is our first zombie, and what I think makes this first zombie attack so effective is how it sets us in reality before the supernatural happens. This isn't a foggy, surreal cemetery where you'd expect to see the Wolfman prowling around. It's just ordinary cemetery, ordinary people doing ordinary things, and then stuff happens.
Do you remember one time when we were small, we were out here? It was from right over there. I jumped out at you from behind the tree, and Grandpa got all excited, and he shook his fist at me, and he said, "Boys, you'll be damned to hell."
It's a really good old man impression.
Well, you used to really be scared here.
Johnny,
Hey, you're still afraid.
stop it now. I mean it.
Famous movie line.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
He takes it really far.
Acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
He'll hear you.
Here he comes now. I'm getting out of here.
Johnny. Oh! No!
There's a lot of great dark humor going on here. Just the fact that what luck that it just turned out that that guy actually is coming to get her, and how they don't have any explanation, you know, what is going on here. They don't have time. It's too urgent for anyone to you know, stand around and say, "Oh, what is this? Is this a, you know, a zombie or what?" If this was a monster movie in the 50s, there'd be an entire scene of scientists gathered around talking about what happened and explaining what the monster is. Here, we don't get any explanation whatsoever. Great shot right there. Notice how the camera angles are always slanted. The shot of him coming through the trees, I didn't have time to say it there, but it kind of reminded me of the scene in Frankenstein where the monster's coming through the trees. And speaking of Boris Karloff, Bill Heinzman, who played the zombie here, said that he thought later that, you know, thinking back, he may have subconsciously gotten the walk from Boris Karloff's role in the movie The Walking Dead from the 30s. And again, notice how the camera is always moving. George Romero is inside the car here holding the camera, and he gets the rock and he goes to smash it. Notice how the rock goes into the car. That was an accident. He almost hit George Romero and the camera. And yes, the zombies are fairly intelligent. They you know, use things as weapons. That's how it started, but I think a lot of movies have tended to dumb the zombies down more. There were 2 shooting days here in the cemetery, and in between those days, the car got into an accident and dented the left side, so they didn't show the left side of the car until here, where she hits a tree, and now they show the dent, so they kind of worked it to their advantage to make it seem like it was intentional. There's a lot of great spatial movement within these shots, like how the zombie goes from screen right to left, and she's running from right to left here. And right here, George Romero is in the back seat of a truck with the camera, so they're actually driving it here. So this is kind of the closest you'd get to some kind of dolly. But independent films are just more creative, I think. They just use what they have. That house right there, which would be ground zero for horror fans if the house still stood today, but this house, they actually knocked it down after they filmed, and that's also the reason they filmed there, because they were going to knock it down anyway. And that's another thing, you know, with independent films always being resourceful. You know, she's tripping a lot here. A lot of people criticize this. Oh, by the way, notice there's a little cellar door there. That might be interesting to note later on. But, you know, this zombie's very slow moving, and you know, it just has this very hokey kind of feel to it. And I think that's one of the film's strengths, that it starts off so hokey. By the way, I love the lighting in these scenes here. I love when the light makes shapes and when the outer edges of the frame are dark. It's always, you know, a favorite of mine. But anyway, the hokiness, I think, just makes the rest of the film so much stronger because you don't expect it to get so serious. So here we have just a woman walking around in a dark house. It's, you know, there's nothing more to it, and that's what's so great about the horror genre, is that it's a genre that can build on nothing. Horror film is all about the darkness, the negative space, just the absence of something happening, and that's where, you know, it's up to us to fill it in with our imagination. Every horror film today owes something to Night of the Living Dead. It completely changed the genre. There's something about it that's just very familiar. When you see newer horror movies, even simple things like animal heads on the wall, you'd see in movies like Evil Dead. That music. There's nothing subtle about the music. It's very old school. It has the feel of an old classic horror movie. And that's why I think Night of the Living Dead is the last of the classic horror films. Even though it was made in 1968, it's shot in black and white, mostly for economic reasons, because black and white film was a lot cheaper. But it just feels like it's a lot older than it really is. There were, of course, older movies that influenced Night of the Living Dead, like Carnival of Souls and Last Man on Earth, which both happen to be public domain as well. It was also inspired a lot by the EC comics. And there were zombie movies before it, like Plan 9 from Outer Space. You're probably wondering, why did I mention that, of all things? But look at how it's night right now. It is obviously night when it was day, you know, just before. So that's something that happens a lot in Plan 9 from Outer Space, but you know, people don't talk about it in Night of the Living Dead as much. There was White Zombie. There were tons of zombie movies before this, but this was the first one where the zombies eat flesh. Such a great moment. This part of the movie, it just makes you feel like it has such a nightmarish quality. Like we're inside Barbara's brain. Like we're really in her perspective. We feel her dementia. But now we're, you know, being introduced to another character named Ben, played by Dwayne Jones. And this is where we start to get some company. So now we don't feel so much like we're stuck with this one character. Now we kind of have Ben to latch on to. So the movie really changes gears. Dwayne Jones was the star of the film, and the cultural significance here can't be ignored. I'm a film buff, but you don't have to be an expert on American history to know that there was a lot of racial tension going on at the time, and Dwayne was hired for the role because he was the best actor who auditioned, and he just happened to be the first black man to star in a horror film. Dwayne said that they should have played it up more, that the black man has a history of being discriminated against and that his character would be angry. And I wish Dwayne was still around today to explain more of what kind of subtext he felt his character had. But it was George Romero who said that they shouldn't address it, that by not playing it up, he felt that they were being more progressive and hip. But in more recent interviews, he said that he kind of regrets it, that they should have listened to Dwayne. But either way, intentional or not, you can analyze the film, and there is some subtext there. Which, even when I saw this as a kid, I wasn't thinking about any of that. But in the back of my head, I took notice to how uncommon it was that usually when you watch all these old horror films, especially the ones from the 30s and 40s, the black man's always the butler or some minor role. And for that reason, this movie seemed a lot more real and a lot more genuine to me. But little did I know, this marked a cultural revolution, that we saw a whole genre in the 70s called the blaxploitation genre, movies like Shaft and Dolomite. So Night of the Living Dead was at the forefront of all that. There's an interview with Dwayne on the 40th anniversary DVD, but it's an audio interview and it's very short, and he doesn't say very much other than the whole time he just talks about how he's sick of the movie, basically. How he doesn't want it interpreted like he doesn't feel appreciative of it, but he just felt that over the years so many people ask him questions about the film that he just is tired of it. And also about how he never watched any of the sequels. So it was a very I don't know how to say. I wouldn't say bitter, but it was just very a very uninterested interview, and it didn't say anything about the film or anything, of interest really. One of the best quotes I've ever heard about this movie is, "Its flaws are budgetary, but its virtues are visionary." It has such a strong, surreal tone. There's something haunting about it. The way Dwayne is killing the zombies, and the audio is slightly out of sync. It's these flaws that somehow make it seem more surreal and effective. Right here, as this zombie shows up and his face is completely obscured in darkness, and then he steps into the light here. Great little moments. Really strong contrast. There's always darks and lights. They probably just lit it with whatever they could. Those might be car lights right there. Who knows? It had a very low budget, $114,000, which is probably mostly film stock, of that time. So that's really cheap, especially for a horror film. It was just a bunch of regular guys getting together to make a movie. Like right there, that's John Russo. That's one of the writers. And, like I said before, how the people who were behind the camera would always be in front of the camera as well. These people all had day jobs. They would work on commercials, and then when they'd have a break from the commercials, they would go and work on the film a little bit. So they were going back and forth between this movie and their day jobs a lot. And there's a great moment here where, as he hits the zombie and he staggers out of the way, only to reveal more. Like, uh-oh, he took out one, but there's a lot more. By the way, this kitchen here is actually the kitchen where they cooked out of and fed the cast and crew.
We're in here now.
And all the furniture in this house they got from a warehouse that was trying to get rid of it. So they got all that furniture for $50.
Don't look at it.
Why not? It's kind of creepy, by the way, how that zombie's eyes were moving around. Some people might see that as a flaw, as a mistake, but I don't think it was. I think it was just the nerves are still moving, or Barbara is actually sort of seeing it in her mind that she thinks it's still alive. The original title of the film was Night of Anubis, which is the Egyptian god for mummification and the protector of tombs. But nobody knew that except George Romero. So, because everybody was confused by the title, they changed it to Night of the Flesh Eaters. But then there was another movie called The Flesh Eaters, so it was eventually changed to Night of the Living Dead. But one of the things that happened was, back in those days, for a film to be copyrighted, you had to have the copyright notice on the film somewhere. And most films would have it at the end, but they had it on the title. Now, when they changed the title, they changed out the title card and forgot to put the copyright notice back in. So that's how the film slipped into the public domain, which has in some ways helped the movie because it's public domain. It's so available that you can get it on any of those bargain DVDs. So there's lots and lots of DVDs with, usually with inferior quality. But I do think that the inferior picture quality kind of helps the mood of the film because it makes it look a little more antique. Like what we're watching right now is very contrasty. And I think that makes it scarier to not be able to see into all the shadows and everything. There do exist some better versions that are, digitally remastered. But I think you need to work up to that. I think, the first time I watched this movie, the best thing available was VHS. So the quality that I saw it on first is how I always imagined the movie to be. And as I see it in better quality, I start to always notice something new. So it's kind of like a new way to experience the movie. So I think it's good to start with the shittiest quality there is. Now, even with the best quality versions, there's not a whole lot they can do because the original elements to this film have been lost in a flood. So that sort of adds more to the mystique of it to me, that a lot of this film is lost in a way. This right here, you expect to see Santa Claus come out of the fireplace or something. I mean, that is definitely a shot of a fireplace. And we have a very Sam Raimi-like camera movement right here. And one of the creepiest moments in the film for some reason. The way that music box closes on her eyes, something about it, it's one of the most memorable moments from the movie. This house has lumber all over the place. Very convenient. The zombies are like a natural disaster. And when he boards up the windows, it's kind of like preparing for a hurricane. Don't work too hard, Barbara. Hopefully everybody's seen the movie without me talking over the whole thing. So if you're looking for the best version of Night of the Living Dead, the one I've seen so far that I recommend is the 40th anniversary DVD. It's really great. It has 2 different commentary tracks on it with George Romero and Russ, John Russo, two separate tracks, but pretty much all the people who've been involved with the movie. And there's a good documentary on it called One for the Fire. There's been colorized versions of the movie, as well as the 1990 remake, which was shot in color, directed by Tom Savini. But if you're looking for the original in black and white, then the version to avoid is the 30th anniversary edition. Oh boy, I need more time to talk about that. Okay, alright, just give me a minute to compose myself. Cinemassacre's Monster Madness will return after these messages.